So he is the chairman of the VIA Institute on Character. He received his PhD in clinical psychology and worked in hospital, community, mental health, and private practice settings for 15 years as a psychotherapist with specialties in chronic pain and eating disorders. He's going to be talking to us today about liberating our character strengths, tilting humanity towards its better nature. Please, he's the first speaker today. Put your hands together and give him a warm welcome up to the stage, starting right now, everybody. Put your hands together right now for Dr. Neal Mayerson.
Well done. Good morning. I'm happy to be here today. Good. It's kind of the point, isn't it? Well, let's see. I'm trying to get oriented here first to what I'm doing. So that's what I'm doing today. And here's where I'm going to start. In 2006, Al Gore, our former vice president, sounded an alarm that global warming was careening out of control to the point that it threatened the future habitability of our planet. And he referred to this as an inconvenient truth. Well, I'm here today to sound the alarm of another inconvenient truth. And I'm doing this because I want to frame our pursuit of happiness a little bit differently than it typically gets framed. I want to frame it so that we understand that it's not frivolous, it's not Pollyannish, it's not selfish, it's not optional or something for our leisure time, and instead that it's a clear and present call to action for all of us. So what is this inconvenient truth that I'm speaking of? And this is how I understand it. We have been advancing our technology at amazing speed, and we've come to have powers associated with things like cloning and virtual reality and artificial intelligence and genetic engineering, life-sustaining technologies, weapons of mass destruction, and recently, at least I have come to learn, maybe all of you knew it, that even our internet can become weaponized. And what the inconvenient truth is that we have not yet matured as human beings to handle well all the responsibilities that come with these emerging powers. And therefore, we're at risk. We're at risk of making egregious errors that could threaten our future. So this alarm first became obvious to me in 1997 when I awoke one morning and learned that scientists had successfully cloned a sheep named Dolly. And it hit me. We now can clone mammals. And of course my mind raced forward, which I guess at some point in the future we're headed towards being able to clone human beings. And who is it that's going to make decisions about what people, what characteristics, what things are we going to clone? Who shall live? Who shall die? How ready are we to handle such heavy decisions? It felt to me like handing the family car over to a 3-year-old. Fast forward to just a few months ago, I was reading Rolling Stone magazine, and their cover article was on the architect of tomorrow, Elon Musk. And we all probably know about Elon Musk. He's a brilliant technologist who's brought us Tesla and is exploring commercial space travel, etc. And he too has a concern for the future of humanity, the impact of out-of-control global warming, and he's worried about the development of artificial intelligence. And I felt like we're really lucky to have forward-thinking geniuses like him helping us prepare for the future. But it hit me that it's not enough that our architects for tomorrow are only technologists. We need our geniuses in human development, people who can help us know how to develop our best selves as human beings so that we have a balance as we move forward between advancing technology and our humanity. Let me illustrate it the following way. If you imagine this graph that shows progress over time, the top line shows our progress in mastering our technology, our physical world, and it obviously is a very positive and steep slope. And the bottom line reflects how we have matured as a human species. How much progress have we made in things like resolving conflict, managing power, ego, sexual impulses and appetites, finding, growing, sustaining love, managing aggression, greed, insecurity, experiencing joy and meaning. How much progress have we made? And it could be argued we've made some progress, but not a lot. Now, the critical thing of this graph is that if you look to the right of it, you see that the lines are growing ever more apart from each other. And it seems to me, I think of that gap as a danger zone for us all. Almost like the jaws of an alligator that are stretching wider and wider. And should we make an error, they snap shut that much harder. Now, if that's all I was coming today to tell you about, that would be a bummer. So I'm happy to also be sounding the alarm of what I'm calling a convenient truth, a very convenient truth, which is that as we magnify and refract those characteristics that are best in us, our strengths of character, that we can, there's no doubt about this, we can, you can, tip humanity towards its better nature. How many of you have heard of the VIA character strengths? And how many of you have taken the VIA survey? Okay, that's a lot. So I'm going to do an overview of them. So character strengths are the parts of our personality that are universally valued, and they have this amazing characteristic that while being good for ourselves as individuals, they are also good for society. They are constellations of feelings, thoughts, and behaviors, and they help us answer questions such as, who am I and who are you? What makes me tick? What makes you tick? And how can I or we contribute to the greater good? The journey of unfolding a science of character and strengths and virtues began as a 3-year project, and it was the master visionary was, and still is, Marty Seligman, who's pictured here. What we aimed to do when Marty and I started working together was to create an effort of unprecedented quality and magnitude to bring science to the table of understanding what's best about human beings and how do we use our best characteristics to build good lives for ourselves and for others. When I asked Marty who in the world would be the very, very, very best person to help us lead this effort, without skipping a beat, he thought of Chris Peterson, who was pictured here as well, who was at the University of Michigan at the time. And fortunately, we were able to get Chris for 3 years full-time away from his university duties to focus on this initiative. And during the course of the 3 years, they brought in the input from about 55 elite scientists, scholars, and positive youth practitioners. And the aim was, since we were starting to bring science to the table, was to bring the two tools that any science needs. Science needs a nomenclature, meaning what is it that we're trying to understand, and how do we define those things in a concrete way? And secondly, how do we measure the things that we're interested in learning more about? So those were the main two aims. And by the end of the 3 years, this started in the year 2000. So by 2003, the project had identified what's now called as the VIA classification, which a lot of you are familiar with. Some of you have handouts. The classification's on the handout, and you can otherwise see it at our website if you're not familiar with it. It identifies 24 character strengths that are categorized or classified in 6 different categories. We created tools of measurement. How do you measure these 24 elements of our personality? And these are the VIA surveys. These are offered free to the world. And I can tell you at this point, over 6 million people from every single country on earth have taken the VIA survey. It's being taken now at a rate of about 1 every 15 seconds of every minute, of every hour, of every day, of every week. Thank you. So it's pretty amazing. And that's without, big marketing campaign or anything. It's because people such as yourselves take the survey, find value in it, tell somebody else about it, and that's how that happens. And then thirdly, the product of this 3-year initiative was the publication of the Character Strengths and Virtues Handbook, which was published in 2004 and is kind of the Bible of this area of science. And it lays the intellectual foundation for all of this. Okay, so the 6 categories of this VIA classification: wisdom and knowledge, which are the capacities that are critical to acquiring and using knowledge; the capacities that involve the exercise of will to accomplish goals in the face of opposition; the capacities that involve tending and befriending others; those capacities that strengthen community life; those that protect against excesses; and those that forge connections to the larger universe and help provide us meaning and purpose. And within each of these categories are nested the 24 character strengths, which you can see when you review the classification, either by the handout or the site. And this is the meat on the bone. So when we first identified the 6 categories, these are broad categories, and we had to put some meat on the bones so you could study them. So the predominant model for understanding human personality has been these 5 characteristics. And what our work has been doing has been illuminating these amazing 24 points of light in our personality that all of us possess. And as we have passed these character strengths through the prism of science, we've discovered 3 main refractions of what they do for us. what these character strengths do for us. First, they help us be productive. You see, they're the well springs of motivation and social success, so they're critical to enhancing performance, enabling achievement, and as well critical to creating opportunity for us all. Secondly, they help us in our pursuit of well-being because it makes us happy. There are pathways to happiness, to our happiness, these character strengths are. And they are important elements of defining our personal identity. And the extent to which our lives are constructed so that they are good expressions of who we are helps build our well-being and our fulfillments in life. And finally, there's this refraction, which is they're not just good for us, but they're good for the collective good. There is a thing called positive contagion. When we express our character strengths, it elevates others around us. Yeah. Right on. Yeah. So I think of these as kind of like the superfoods of our psyche. You know, they're packed with positive psychological and social power. Now, this is all fine and good, except I have to tell you that after 17 years of doing this work and understanding that these amazing qualities reside in each and every one of us, I've had to ask myself, given that, why in the world why aren't they predominating the world? Why does it seem that the world is being predominated by negativities? Why is it that I personally, in my own efforts to grow the character strengths in myself, why is it that I've struggled so much to do that? Why has it been so hard? And what I've come to realize is that as I'm trying to magnify and refract my character strengths, that there are countervailing forces that are opposing my effort. And it behooves me to understand these opposing forces so that I can be strategic about them. So let me describe some of these countervailing forces that I've observed as being relevant and issues for me. One is something that is called the negativity bias. We have learned through science that in our evolution, we've evolved so that our brain gives greater priority to negative things, to things that could be threats to our existence or to our well-being. And that we pay more attention to those things that could threaten our wellness or our survival than to all the wonderful things of life. And that kind of makes sense, right? Because we can't experience all the wonderful things of life if we're actually not alive. So our brains really focus more. They're stickier for problems. They're stickier for problems. And this is known as the negativity bias. And what has happened is commercial interests have figured out how to take advantage of our negativity bias. For when they want to get our attention to sell for us to buy the things that they are selling, no matter what that is, they can get our attention best by stoking our fears, our anxieties, and our insecurities. That's where our attention goes first. And now, on top of this, we have the open communication form of the internet, which ends up kind of being a playground for our negativities. We have inadvertently, inadvertently, created an environment for ourselves that stokes our primitive fight or flight response in our brain, stimulating our brains for anger, aggression, fear, and avoidance. That's what we're being primed for. And those are not conditions that are conducive for focusing on the positive. Which means for us that we all must now become more conscious that in addition to our physical environment, we exist in a psychological environment. And we need to manage properly our psychological environment as much as we attend to our physical environment. We can no longer afford to be inadvertent about what we choose to consume and reward, what we expose ourselves to psychologically, and most importantly, what we put into the psychological environment that others get exposed to. We need to become very conscious of that. A second opposing force is our ability to rationalize. We have this vexing ability to rationalize, to perceive things simply the way we want to perceive things, regardless of what the facts might otherwise be dictating. And this rational agility allows us to do things like overestimate how well we're doing in our lives. You know, you ask people in the world, how are you doing? They say, great. You ask people in the world, how is everyone else doing? They say, not so great. You know, overestimate how happy we are and how much opportunity there is for us to grow. We can rationalize all that away. And that's why if we're not depressed or anxious or otherwise suffering, why we tend not to have the stick-to-itiveness to sustain positive growth efforts. We need to have a good reason to put the effort into changing over time, because that anything we are trying to change over time, it takes effort and a sustained effort over time. And we need to have good reason to do that. And what I've realized is that the good reason is not my self-interest, but the interests of others. Oh my God, how many times in life do I have to be taught the lesson that it's not all about me? I need to improve myself, not for myself. I need to improve myself to be a better father, a better son, a better spouse, a better brother, coworker, citizen, community member. That's why I need to become better. That's my reason for improving myself. I need to become better for the people I impact, directly and indirectly. That's how I find meaning and purpose. And so I need to develop and sustain positive relationships in my life to keep me honest, to keep me from rationalizing my life that I don't need to, grow in this way or that. And most importantly, relationships that I care about that give me good reason to bring my best self forward into those relationships. Third, all systems, all living systems, have a tension between wanting to grow and wanting to seek stability. And the forces to seek stability resist efforts to change. So we need, as we go about trying to change ourselves in a positive way, we need to expect resistance. And then we need to be strategic about it. So we need to choose goals that are meaningful to us, not goals that are meaningful to other people, but goals that are meaningful to us. We need to put support systems in place to help us when we stumble. And we need to understand that change occurs in small increments over long periods of time, and it requires sustained effort. We don't improve ourselves in a weekend retreat. We can make progress in a weekend retreat, And that's a step along the way. We don't do it in a 12-week program, an 8-week program, this, that. It takes sustained effort over time to grow ourselves. The fourth countervailing force is a little more complicated, and it has to do with socialization forces that can push us towards becoming who others want us to be more than becoming our truest and best self. And so let me explain it this way. See, we all come into the world with some genetic predispositions. And then we are immediately, once we're born, we're handed to adults to care for us. From that moment on in our life, from that moment of birth on in our life unfolds with a tension between becoming who we are and satisfying the requirements that others have of us to receive their love and respect and attention. And we have that tension for the rest of our life. Now, over time, we develop a personal identity here shown by the gold oval that includes what's best about us. When the requirements that people, the influential people in our life, when their requirements are fairly much aligned with who we naturally are, we're golden. Everything's good. We can unfold. We have a lot of things going for us to become very healthy and fulfilled and have strong well-being. The issue is that that's not constant in our lives, and in too many people's lives, it's not even common. Instead, what happens is the requirements of others become discrepant from who you feel you are. And so pleasing others causes you to feel out of your own skin. And so when that happens, we have a dilemma. Do we get frozen, not know what to do, and become lost? Having neither the satisfaction that comes from self-acceptance nor the satisfactions that come from being loved by others? Do we stay true to ourselves and give up some of the goodies that come from being in relationship and being loved and respected? Or do we focus on pleasing the people in our lives that we care about and who care about us and care for us, and get alienated from ourselves? You see, we all can make it easier on ourselves if we understand this. We all can make it easier by resisting the tendency that we all have to expect others to be like us. We need to stop demanding sameness. I do it all the time. Two of my top character strengths are creativity and perseverance. And when I'm working with people, I expect them to have creativity and perseverance and have problems when they don't. I need to stop expecting people to be like me. Instead, I need to respect that nature has created us so that only together, and this is what is so brilliant, only together do we have all of what we need to succeed in life. Not as individuals, but only together. Nature's created a psychodiversity. That's what I call it, a psycho. We all heard of biodiversity. Nature's created a psychodiversity, imbuing each of us with our own individual character strength profiles. And these differences are essential. They're not simply an inconvenient truth that we have to tolerate. No, it's the genius of nature's design. Only by respecting and nurturing this diversity is that all of the character strengths, all of these 24 character strengths, can be liberated into the world in their fullest glory, enabling us collectively to soar. Now, I want to show you a video now of the pain and the joy that can come from realizing that you focus too much on becoming who others want you to become versus a more authentic expression of who you really are. I was interviewing this woman, a high-ranking employee in a pretty large healthcare company, and this is her answer to a very simple question I asked her. I said, Estella, tell me what it's been like to take the VIA survey and get your results.
It's always been about, what's wrong with you? So you have this weird picture of who you are because of what other people have said, well, this is who you are. And so for me, I've never really formulated my true core person. I thought I knew who I was, but not really, because I've had so many other, people telling me, well, this is, just, I guess, giving, their perception of who I am, and for me, just sort of believing what I hear. And so I took my VIA. There were, strains in my VIA that kind of confused me. It's always been about, and so for me, I've never really formulated my true core person. I thought I knew who I was, but not really, because I've had so many other, people telling me, well, this is, just, I guess, giving, their perception of who I am, and for me, just sort of believing what I hear. And so I took my VIA. There were, strains in my VIA that kind of confused me.
Wow, what a place to end. You don't have the rest of the video? No? Well, that's unfortunate. That's really unfortunate. So what happens is Estella goes on to say, and what's fascinating about this, if the whole video was there, is that you can see that the part you saw so far is she's answering the question from her mind, disconnected from her heart. And what you see later is that she reaches a point where the two come together very beautifully, because she starts to say, as she starts to approach saying, I saw things written down about myself, and I knew they were true. And what she started to say there, it's all about like, I'll continue to describe it in case they don't get it up, which is that as she starts to describe seeing things on paper and seeing that those are parts of her that she hasn't been expressing and developing because they haven't been what the people around her have selected for her. She's been a good girl growing up, and she did everything everyone was supposed to do, and she's been rewarded, and she got married, and she has kids and a good job, and as she said, I thought I was happy. And then she says, but in a way, I don't feel like I was born, and then she hesitates because that's where she starts to connect with her heart. She says, until last month. And last month was when she took her VIA survey. And then as she then finishes the interview, answering this question, big crocodile.
It's always been about, what's wrong with you. So you have this weird.
So as you can tell, it's always been about what's wrong with her. And let's just suffice it to say she learned that there's something more to life, which is what's right with me. And that she deserves to be the person she is. And that's when she became very touched, and big crocodile tears started rolling down her face. All right, so, wow, okay. All right, so given all of this, where have I landed myself in terms of tips that I've grown to have for myself as I go about trying to go about this work of trying to grow and liberate my own character strengths into the world. One is I always remind myself that all of the character strengths, all 24 of them, are capacities that I have. I can't forget that all 24 are capacities I have, and at any time I can decide to focus on one and grow it with practice. And I always need to remind myself that growth and change takes time. It happens in small increments, and I need to celebrate the small wins. Boy, that's a big one for me, because I tend to just okay, I got that, and to pause and celebrate the small wins is really important. And to let my ability to imagine a positive future pull me forward. Not getting pushed from behind, but pull me forward to a bright future. Second, I need to make sure I have a growth partner, somebody enlisted in my own personal efforts to grow. Somebody to keep me honest with myself, somebody to keep me accountable, somebody who I can celebrate progress with, and somebody who will support me when I stumble. And Donna should be here somewhere, and I thank you for all of that, wherever you are. Third, I need to understand I have this negativity bias, and for every negative, it takes some multiple of positives to counteract it. And therefore, I need to manage my attention properly to give adequate attention to the positive. I'm always trying to remind myself of that, because like my nature is to attend to the negative, and I know I've been rewarded a lot for attending to the negative, seeing problems before they happen, circumventing problems, and so I've been rewarded for that, so I need to make special effort to stay focused on the positive. Fourth, I need to manage my stress, because under stress we all tend to revert to old habits, and when we're trying to establish new habits, we have to manage our stress so we're not always having that pull, 2 steps forward, 1 step backwards. We need to manage our stress. Fifth, I fill my world as much as I can with cues. We have so many things grabbing for our bandwidth of our attention, and I have to fill my world with cues to remind me, whether it's things at my workstation, whether it's things that I can wear on my wrist, whether it's coffee cups, things that hang on my walls, whatever it is. I need all of that to get my attention straight. Sixth, I need to practice seeing others for their character strengths, seeing others. I need to practice it and practice it and practice it and practice it. I also need to practice being, and what I mean by that is aligning my life activities with who I am as a person, who I am most essentially as a person. Choose my relationships, accordingly, choose my goal, choose my work, try as much as I can to align my life with who I am. Remember not to get too obsessed with my signature strengths, the one like those top 5 or the ones that are the most predominant in us and form most essentially our identity. To not get too focused on that. There are some strengths that are neglected strengths. We used to have them more when we were at a different stage in our life or a child, let's say, and when we reflect on it, we want to really revitalize those strengths. So we have some strengths that have been neglected that we want to rekindle. We have some strengths that we simply, because circumstances in our life have changed, that we want to I've recently had a situation in my life where it made sense to me to start working on forgiveness. And that's not one of my top strengths. But my circumstance in life was such that it was very relevant. Forgiveness became relevant, and I could know that I could focus on it and build it up. And there's an interesting principle. When we try to work on our lesser strengths, there's this thing called the towing principle, which is, it's almost like a tow truck, that we can take our top strengths and use them to kind of tow the lesser strength forward and higher. And here I want to focus on this issue of activism. We don't have the luxury of being passive about the kind of stimulations we allow ourselves to be exposed to and our children and our society at large. We don't have that luxury. We each have circles of influence. Every single one of us have our own circles of influence that can be very tight and small or larger. And it behooves us, whether we're employers or helping professionals or parents or friends or family members, people who create advertisements, people who create virtual realities, people who create TV, movies, etc. It behooves us each to take responsibility, to chip in our part to bring in character strengths, at least to our circles of influence. In that sense, we are all culture builders. You see, our lives can be thought of as a stream with a bed of stones that we've cast. And each stone sends a ripple. And each ripple keeps going, touching everything connected to us. And we know at some level that everything in the universe is actually interconnected. So in that, it can get abstract, but not that abstract, to know that each ripple we make, it keeps rippling. And like I said, we have circles of influence. So every time we are getting ready to think something or do something, we can make a choice and decide what energy do we want to be spreading into the world. We have the opportunity to be mindful of how we want to impact our circles of influence. And if each of us commits to becoming more mindful of character strengths in others, in seeing them and in being those character strengths in ourselves, then together we can bring about a new dawning for humanity. Now, in closing, I'm a little tentative to play this video at this point, but I'm going to give it a shot. And this is an amazing video. I'll just do a quick setup for it. Leandria, at this point, was a teenager, a spoken word artist. And she was struggling, as a lot of teenagers do, with finding herself in the context of many forces for conformity and peers wanting you to be this way and that way and this way and that way. And she describes that. Leandria lived with a single father and 11 siblings in a pretty rough part of town, and she had a lot of co-parenting responsibilities, and she had ambitions, aspirations to be the first person in her family to go to college. So she wanted to graduate high school first, and then she wanted to go to college. So she had a lot on her plate and a lot of challenges. And just watch what Leandria has to say about that.
It was 6:58 p.m. on Tuesday, October 26, 2010, when I realized I wanted to be myself. At that moment, I realized that I just couldn't be anyone else. You see, I get so caught up in these popularity contests that sometimes I forget the capacity of my own content, all the amazing that makes up who I am and my truth, the flaws that piece together my facial expressions and exude the sentimental youth of my being, calling to light the potency of my nature to laugh when something's funny or cry when something's sad, my nature to blissfully love and be okay with that. At 6:58 p.m. on Tuesday, October 26, on 2010, I knew that I could no longer stand to be stood over, lost within this crowd of sameness and continue to be picked over. I realized at that moment I wanted to be different, set apart from the group the way my fathers intended. I knew at that moment I needed to speak out and take my turn, to let the world know that I do have a voice and it needs to be heard. But I'm not gonna lie. On that same Tuesday, October 26, 2010 at 6:58 p.m., I got a little nervous. Started wondering if this fight was even worth it. This fight to be unique and stay true to I. But at 6:59, I glanced at my phone and caught a glimpse of my eye. It twinkled. It was pretty. And I thought so out loud. I stared at my beauty till 7:03 and I instantly felt proud. I realized at that moment when I looked into my phone that the entire time I had been thinking, I had been doing it on my own, under the approval of no prom queen, the dictation of no queen bee, only under the desired will of Lee. And realizing that I had a mind, I knew that I was officially one of a kind. One to be recognized, emphasized, and accepted for the beauty I saw through my eyes. At 6:58 p.m., I knew. On Tuesday, October 26, 2010, I saw, and at 7:03, I became beauty in its most passionate form. The beholder of my destiny, walker of my own path. I realized at that moment I wanted everything I already had. I have my family, goals, and the ambition to see them through. How can I take advantage of what's mine if I'm too busy being you? So, at 6:58 p.m. on Tuesday, October 26, 2010, I knew that I could no longer stand to be anyone else. I would serve me no justice. And that's just what I felt. Thank you.
Amazing, huh? So I want to point out two things before I conclude. First, did you notice that she was talking to a group of teachers? Did you notice that the teachers gave her a standing ovation? So the point there is that when we bring our best selves forward, it elevates others. Here, it actually elevated people into a standing ovation, okay? So let's never forget that. Secondly, as I was driving Lee home afterwards, she thanked me. And I said, well, all right, but Ashley, I want to thank you because I asked you to do me a favor and speak with these teachers. And she said, she said, yeah, I know, and that's what I thought also. But you have no idea how I feel right now and how different I feel right now than when I came to do this. Because I've been going through a tough patch, and I've kind of I lost track of myself. And this has put me back on track. And so it made me realize that the opportunities we give other people to be themselves are so important in ways sometimes we don't even know. And so in concluding, I just, let's see, most of us in this room, if the statistics are right, somewhere between 35 and 50 times a day, we look at our phone. Let's be Lee.